Hey photographers, a few weeks ago Strongman Matt asked if there was any benefit to shooting RAW. I gave him a short reply, but also promised that I might do a video on the topic. Now before I do that, I'm often asked about manual settings, and you worry that if you don't use them, you're not taking advantage of your camera. Here's the thing. A lot of the power that's built into the camera is its ability to understand the scene, recognize faces, evaluate the light, and then apply the best settings for exposure, for color, and for focus. And that leaves you to do what you do best, choosing the best time and position to take the photo, composing the image, and then waiting until the decisive moment to snap the shutter. Using the power of the auto modes is taking advantage of the camera. When you use the manual modes, the camera is taking advantage of you. That's a little bit funny and a little bit glib. Obviously, the camera isn't as smart as you. It doesn't have your artistic sensibilities or understand what you want from this photo. That's when you'll want to take over, making the picture lighter or darker, changing the white balance or the color settings, focusing on what's most important to you. And as an introduction to shooting RAW, that concept actually works well, because if the auto mode didn't deliver the picture you want, you can make the adjustments in camera and take it again, or you can make the adjustments to the image when you get home. And that's when a RAW file is most useful. Well, for exposure and color anyway. Currently, RAW files don't have the ability to refocus an image. So, if you've wondered about RAW and why you might want to save RAW files as well as your JPEG images, give me a few minutes to explain and demonstrate the why and how of working with RAW files. Now, nearly all cameras save their files as JPEG images. It's the photo file format you'll run into most often. It's widely used, widely supported, and that gives it an advantage over the other image file types. A good way to think of the difference is to refer to the RAW as files and JPEG as images. Not all computers or software can read RAW, and RAW files vary from one manufacturer and one model to the next. When a new camera is introduced, it may take a few weeks before the computer software catches up and is able to open, understand, and display a RAW file from that camera. Now, pretty much all of the cameras I review have the ability to save RAW files as well as JPEG images, and it's a menu option that I enable whenever I can. Some cameras have limitations, and for certain features and capabilities, will only save JPEG images. Now, after you save an image, the RAW file and the JPEG image may look quite different. The JPEG image is a smaller file and likely looks much more like the photo you expect, while the RAW file is huge and may look dull in comparison. Now, that's because the RAW file is a direct recording of the data captured by the sensor, while the JPEG image is a processed and compressed image created from that data. Now, if you've set the white balance, adjusted the color profile, or changed other settings, they're typically applied only to the JPEG image, and the RAW file is an unadulterated and unprocessed version of exactly the information captured by each pixel on the sensor. And this makes it possible to shoot black and white JPEGs and later recover the color information from the RAW file. As a result, RAW files are bigger files than the JPEG image. JPEG is a lossy compression, which means that some data is discarded in the conversion from the sensor's data as the JPEG file is created. This means that using the JPEG plus RAW setting, your memory card just got a whole lot smaller. But in my mind, memory cards, as well as computer storage space, is cheap. You bought a good camera? Take advantage of all it has to offer and buy a few more cards. Now, the camera will have some settings to help you manage the conversion from the sensor's data to the JPEG file, and as a result, those settings are now baked into the image. Even if you make adjustments, Those calculations and manipulations are done in a fraction of a second and are relatively generic. Yes, as camera processors become more powerful, the JPEG conversion engine becomes better at identifying image types and applying specific settings to each. But the RAW file can be manipulated later, which enables you at your leisure, with all of the considerable processing power of your computer, to make adjustments to optimize the image, while viewing the image on a large screen with room and time for some trial and error. And once you have a RAW file, you can create multiple JPEG files with any number of settings. Some cameras have the ability to process RAW files in camera during playback. And nearly all manufacturers provide desktop software to open their RAW files and convert them to JPEG images. Now, if you're old enough, think of the RAW file as the negative and the JPEG file as the print. In a photo darkroom, a negative can be managed and manipulated to create a print or multiple prints. Now, similarly, using software like Adobe Lightroom, a RAW file can be processed using a variety of settings and tools to create the final result. Settings like white balance, color profile, and sharpening, which are integrated into the JPEG image, can all be modified and applied to the RAW file and then output to a final JPEG images. And you still have your original. Of course, not all images need to be adjusted, but when you run into an image that didn't turn out the way you hoped, chances are you can make the changes needed to the RAW file. Now, I primarily use it to recover highlights and shadows. As I review the images and spot one where the exposure was off or there are details lost, I'll open the RAW file for that image in Lightroom. Now, I'm not going to do a Lightroom tutorial, and there are lots of other programs that can do what Lightroom does. I use it mostly because it's widely used and I'm familiar with it. Now, that said, it has more features than I use and more power than I really need. Now, after I've decided which pictures could use some adjustment, first I'll have a look at the white balance. If it's off, I can reset the color temperature up or down as needed using the sliders or numerical entry. And then, using the highlight and shadow sliders, I'll look for details that might have been lost in the highlights and the shadows. Now, there is a danger in pushing these, or in fact, any of the adjustments too far, so I try to back off from a dramatic setting. But those are artistic, aesthetic, and personal adjustments. And then it gets technical, and I'll look at the histogram. The exposure slider centers the exposure, but always with an eye on the image. I want to keep the image looking natural. And then I'll adjust the white and the black points so that I'm using all of the available dynamic range for the photo. And finally, Lightroom has two sliders, clarity and vibrance. I'm not really sure what's going on with these, but I'll make adjustments to make the image pop. Again, I'm careful not to go too far and usually back off a bit. I'll make adjustments to all the files that I think need it, and then I'm ready to save the images. Again, Lightroom offers more options than I need. Now, although a camera's JPEG processor may only have one setting, most photo software has multiple output options, JPEG as well as other supported file formats. Multiple options for saving JPEG images include size and compression, and of course, that's only scratching the surface of what Lightroom can do, but that should give you a sample of why it makes sense to use the RAW plus JPEG setting. And if the file space issue feels overwhelming, consider that after you've made the adjustments and output the JPEG images from the RAW files, you can delete some or all of the RAW files. Now, I don't, again, because I think storage is cheap and you can never have enough backup. Thanks for watching. I hope this helps. I'm always ready to help, and I do reply to all relevant questions and civil comments. I enjoy interacting with you. And shoot until your memory card is full and your battery is empty. And if this channel and my content pleases you, it would please me to have you as a subscriber. Thank you.